Hey guys, Mrs. D again. I am making the video for the Founding Fathers and founding documents and all that fun stuff. So, we have to talk Revolutionary War. By this point, you should have gone over colonial history, the Crucible, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, and you should have done all of Scarlet Letter. So if you have not done those, go back and listen to the videos. There was also, just before this, a reading assignment called Jeb Bush and Modern Sex Shaming. It's actually an article on something called the Scarlet Letter Law that Jeb Bush tried to put into effect, I believe in Florida. So you should definitely pause and read that article that I pushed out to you. If you have not done those things, don't listen to this video anymore. Go back and do those things. I'm trying to pace the assignments so that you're pausing lecture, going back, reading things, so you're not doing the same stuff for too miserably long. This is just a bunch of information, though. Occasionally an information dump like this has to happen. So, Founding Fathers. We inevitably go over the founding documents. So, in this PowerPoint, we're talking about them, but we are going to do a detailed breakdown of the Bill of Rights, the preamble to the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all that good stuff. Sometimes Patrick Henry's live free or die. Give me liberty or give me death. Sorry, give me liberty or give me death. But let's talk about kind of what causes the Revolutionary War for our purposes. Also, the sound you hear is my puppy. Breaking out of colonial rule. So there was an intense sort of awakening around this time that imperial or monarchical rule was perchance not the best way to be. Most countries were ruled by emperors or kings and queens, which meant that family lines decided who ruled a country. Now, this means that occasionally you get a dud. And we did have one of the more inefficient English kings running things when we got to America. So I believe George IV, Mad King George, is not exactly who anybody wants steering the ship. Now, the issue, when you guys have a president in power that you don't agree with, at worst, you have 8 years of them. But if you have a king that you disagree with, you have them until they die. So there could be decades and decades of bad leadership that is based out of all the wrong things. And that was a real concern that was happening. So, the issue with a king, sorry, I had to pause. Sorry, puppy. So the big question is the king a tyrant? So you have a weird sort of three-circle Venn diagram of good, effective kings, tyrants, and crazy. How do you know what the difference is? Because there's overlap on all of them. There are truly efficient kings who are a little crazy. There are tyrants who have some efficiency. The big concern here would be trying to make sure you had the most effective king you could, because you don't get to opt out of a king. You don't get to be like, that one not so much, but the next one fine. Unless a king decides to abdicate the throne in favor of someone else, or unless you kill the royal family, you are stuck with them. So, one, it is, I think, important to note that they did actually have a mad king. There is some historical debate over what causes the madness, but he is actually mad. My understanding is that he had porphyria. Porphyria is a disease that comes in waves. It causes mental illness, as in breaks with reality, delusions, anger problems. Things that are good when you're ruling a country. The king was legitimately bad at ruling as a result of this. Also, you had put a group of people in America who were basically told, you're not wanted in England because you don't get along. You don't follow the rules here. If you have a bunch of people together who don't follow the rules, what makes you think they're going to keep listening? It's something to consider that the group of people in America were kind of prone to rebellion. However, it cannot be underestimated that without the aid of France, we would never have been able to mobilize. Vastly outnumbered, vastly outgunned, not enough resources to go around, needed the help of a stronger, more established country. We got that from the Marquis de Lafayette and also from Thomas Jefferson. Both of them had extremely good ties with France. We also sort of decided to help France with their own rebellion. Not so much, but like a little. Really not to the degree they helped us. However, if we didn't overthrow England, French Revolution probably would not have occurred. So, Washington, as George Washington, obviously, hopefully you knew that. George Washington was a huge historical figure in his own time. When we talk about any historical figure, there's always an issue with saying this person's important, because obviously over time, certain people rise out of the ashes of their own historical time periods to just become notable figures. They are important anyway. But when they're important in their own time, recognized by their own peers and their own people, that's often really hard to do. It's one of the reasons I like Shakespeare. Shakespeare has survived 500 years, but also in his own time was reckoned as very important. So Washington was a unifying figure, well respected on kind of all sides of the argument. Like even people that were fighting Washington were like, damn, it's a pleasure to fight you, Mr. Washington, General. In terms of having an idea to get behind and a man that well represented that idea, Washington's true concern was much more complex than we can dive into in an English class. A history class would be able to kind of do this at a better pace. But Washington wanted to avoid reestablishing a monarchy in America. Like he didn't want to leave one king to establish a new line of monarchy in America. He also did not want party fighting to become a defining feature of a new country, because he believed that party fighting was essentially how countries unmake themselves as opposed to make themselves. He did not want to become the crutch that a new country relied upon. He was very worried that America would not actually sustain itself as a governing structure without him, because he became so important to people. So it was an unpopular decision that he didn't kind of decide to become King Washington. They offered him a kingship. And they also said, basically, you can stick in here for as long as you like. And he opted into a more controlled way of doing things. Now, to be fun, because I'm fun, Hamilton. I'm going to be a real hipster for a second here. When I was in high school and we had AP US history and I had to take the AP test, I distinctly remember saying, as long as the open-ended questions are related to the American Revolution, I will get a 5 on this exam, because I knew everything there was to know about Alexander Hamilton. I loved him. I was like, why does no one care about this man? He is fascinating. Now everyone thinks Alexander Hamilton is cool. And yes, the AP US question that year happened to be about American Revolution. And yes, I did get a 5. You are looking at a real nerd here. So, Hamilton, the musical, has now made cool what I always knew to be really cool. Alexander Hamilton was this like right-hand man to George Washington, this establishing figure in a new country. And one of the things that's kind of cool about the musical is I really like the way that they portrayed Mad King George, and I really like the way they portrayed Washington. Now, that isn't to say that Washington is 100% accurate in here, obviously not. But the way they portrayed King George, I really liked. So you have, from Hamilton, all 3 of the King George numbers. Now, I gave the version to you where all 3 numbers are in the same song, rather than the 3 separate versions separately. But these come at different points of the play. One of them comes when he is kind of hearing that the Americans are unhappy, like the Boston Tea Party. Then another one's happening during the fighting. And then another one's, there's a little coda of like, oh, we lost, good luck. And then hearing Washington is leaving office. All of them, obviously at different time periods, important for different reasons. The lyrics here are very good. The next song I have for you is One Last Time, which is Washington's number on why he would leave office. I like it. I think if I had to kind of boil down the role of Washington and the controversy behind him not deciding to stick it out longer, and kind of rounding out his decisions it's a good enough example of it. Again, I am not saying that these are entirely historically accurate. There's some conundrum in here. In particular, I am annoyed at Hamilton for one reason, which is that without the Washington stamp of approval, Hamilton would never have been allowed to marry Elizabeth. What I note about this song is that Washington's kind of final letter is quoted in it. And that's a good way to get you guys to read historical text. So do listen to the two Hamilton songs. In general, I want you to realize that Americans were naturally born out of the idea that rebellion is the pathway to freedom and to get what we want. And that we were always rebels. We were counter to whatever the dominant ideology was. We were sent here to get away because, they didn't want us there, causing problems. Do you still see rebellion as a major role in modern America? And is it still the pathway to freedom? For colonists, America meant an escape out of a social system that really had no room for growth or change. Many people would ask, is the American dream still one where you can make your own future and your own success? Americans wanted to be able to carve a country where we were able to provide for our own values. What are they? Do we think that they're still here and still successful? It might sound petty to say that some of these ideas were established in contrast to existing ideas. But one thing I want you to consider on a very weird, petty, small scale. We are a nation of coffee drinkers. Europe doesn't do this. I'm not saying Europe doesn't have coffee. Europe totally has coffee. But most people in Europe still drink tea in the morning, and there's still tea time in the afternoon, and it's the thing that they are mostly drinking. They have coffee there for when they need it, or some of them go pure espresso. But we decided we're not drinking tea anymore. And it's 200 years later, and we're still holding on to this. We're not a nation of tea drinkers. It's a little strange to me. We're holding on to this issue we had once where we dumped a bunch of tea in Boston Harbor. What does it mean to be American now? This is the question that we will ponder all year, and I really want you guys to consider it in the light of this PowerPoint. Make sure you listen to those songs. We will, next time in class, go through the founding documents together. Talk to you guys soon.